Well, the unthinkable's happening. The mighty empire of American entertainment, Hollywood, is collapsing. If you pay close attention, you can tell from celebrity interviews that they're very aware that the problem is happening. But I think it's pretty obvious to all of us at this point.
I remember I saw the first trilogy on videotapes and the prequel of the second trilogy in a movie theater, actually the same movie theater in Paris, and it was something. And I'm wondering, if they had existed, do you think you would have released them on a streaming platform, George?
I don't know. Streaming is very powerful and it's great. It's really upped the movie business because the theatrical movie business we could see the problems, and it was not good. And so everybody was looking to streaming to save it, but nobody knew it would. And that's when Netflix took off.
But you saved Hollywood.
I think the collapse of these corporations and this media conglomerate empire is very complex and ongoing, but I think the causes are actually extremely obvious and simple. We're going to break down these causes into a few categories, but it really comes down to this. Very simply, audiences feel like the product they're getting is less quality and more expensive. And anytime a person has to pay more for less, they feel cheated. It's like going to a movie theater and paying $30 for a bucket of popcorn. You're already a little bit upset about the popcorn price, but then when you get it, you find out it's not even good. It's not what you remember. It's just burned, blackened popcorn. And then when you go to complain to the manager about your $30 bucket of bad popcorn, the manager says, well, why don't you want to buy another $30 bucket of burned popcorn? And then you say, that's ridiculous. And then they say, you're a bad person. That actually seems to be, as silly as that is, sort of the state of American entertainment right now. And I would say, quite simply, this is a bad business model. By the way, if you hear fireworks outside, forgive me, it is America Freedom Weekend, and people are still celebrating, so. Now, I think that really what's happening ultimately is that audiences have lost confidence in Hollywood. So, for most of our lives, there have always been sort of bad movies, cable movies, bad space filler television. But for many years, there were really so many good movies that came out that we just expected quality entertainment coming out multiple times a year, and we sort of looked forward to and got excited about it. Now, you might go to the theaters for different reasons. You might go for romance or comedy or action. But at the end of the day, you're having fun, or you have heroes that inspire you to be more than you are, or you just want to laugh. You want to escape the daily problems of modern life, and so you go and you enjoy yourself. What's happening now, however, is people are no longer enjoying themselves. So this loss of confidence, I think, is evidenced in a few things. I think it's a combination of moral betrayal and preachiness that's frankly a little bit hypocritical, and audiences sense this. Now, our society has divided over many ideological grounds, there's no questioning that, but I think things that people would overlook or agree on have become even divisive in films. I actually studied a book about this years ago, and it basically argued that it chronicled the history of America's relationship to cinema. And there was a period long before I was born when the majority of religious people, probably long before most of us were born, would actually formally boycott Hollywood. And they were told to do that so by their religious leaders because religion in America was concerned that Hollywood is beginning to promote things that were not healthy or moral. Now, of course, those churches lost that battle. People wanted to go have fun. People went to the movies anyway. But what I've noticed looking back over history is that America has changed its views on many moral questions, and I think a lot of that is not due to reading philosophy, but a lot of it is due to the perpetual influence of Hollywood. Now, from my perspective in 2024, looking back, it does actually make me pretty queasily uncomfortable and sometimes even angry the way I think sometimes women were treated in certain Hollywood roles in the 60s, 70s, 80s. But now looking back, what makes it worse is that America, I think, feels a little bit betrayed. We were told to have a certain view of sexual ethics from Hollywood for decades before I was born, and that messaging became more and more pronounced. And then eventually America started listening and following suit and thinking, yeah, these views are the normal views. And then we found out about the people who were running this Hollywood empire. And we found out these people are very often wickedly immoral. And then we found out so many of the other celebrities, to make sure that their career happened, probably looked the other way while terrible things were happening behind closed doors. And then those people who live in LA, Hollywood, New York, unfortunately do seem to portray this air of moral superiority to the rest of the country, the South, the Southwest, the middle of the country. And this moral superiority, this sort of self-righteousness, this turning of what used to be celebrations of cinema into, postmodern ideological pulpits, unfortunately does not resonate with people. And the more that it doesn't resonate with the majority of America, well, it seems like they just sort of double down on their ideological preaching. Now, I will say, I think it's one thing to promote something that is moral or good or kindness or being kind to people who are not like us, but I actually don't think that's what the majority of the people I've talked to take issue with in Hollywood. Because this postmodern political ideology that's sort of being preached in film, in books, in music, and from the award ceremonies is very on the nose. And yet some of the same people seem to have extreme moral issues. Now, it's one thing if I have a moral issue and I say, I think we can both do better here. That's one thing. But if I am angry with you and vitriolic and self-righteous as I just look down on you, well, you may not take that messaging very well. I think that's what Hollywood is doing. So I'm just old enough to remember the World War II generation. And of course, premarital sex has always been a thing. Men objectifying women, that's always been a thing. But it's, I think, silly and naive to deny the fact that before the sexual revolution, before the 1960s, these things were treated differently in society, for better or for worse. But I'm old enough to remember those people who grew up in a different time and had a difficult time relating to some of these things to anyone born after the 60s. There's interviews online of people who were born before the sexual revolution. They look at millennials, Gen Xers, baby boomers, and they think, man, you guys have some class. But Hollywood partook in this sort of moral paradigm shift, but it's been shifting ever since. And if you believe what Hollywood says in the 90s, well, come around the 2000s, they're going to tell you were wrong for ever thinking that. I think, frankly, this has just turned a lot of people off. There's another aspect to this. I think sometimes the moral ideological preaching that Hollywood is doing is further just ostracizing people. For example, I think there have been strong female characters in cinema for a very long time. However, if Hollywood says, but it's not enough, I can say, sure, that's acceptable. So let's have some more strong, intelligent female characters that are not made just for the objectification of men. I can get behind that. The problem is they do this in the most lazy, shallow, silly way, and it's often actually against, this view of feminism is actually against sometimes the feminine. In other words, to make a strong female character, a writer in a very lazy, simplistic, naive way will simply say, we need to make her better at a thing the man does, and we won't develop her skill set organically, or so why she's so good at this. We'll just take a character that you love who's a male, and then in one short scene show that she's just better at it for some reason. Of course, this is going to make people frustrated when you take a character people love and then just say, well, yeah, he's not as cool as you think he is because look at this new character that you haven't grown to like yet. This is common sense. But it goes a little bit deeper because I think sometimes to present a strong female character, Hollywood has actually just tried to make the females a bit masculine. In other words, they're presenting the idea that the only way in which a woman can be worth something is if she's like a man. This has the opposite effect of what Hollywood, I think, intends if I'm being charitable to their intentions. It would be far better, I think, for them to write female characters who are quite feminine and original and maybe have their own personality. And I think from talking to people, I think this would play so much better with women my age and quite a bit younger than this played out, overused, lazy girl boss motif. Believe it or not, a lot of women want to be feminine and they want to see the feminine portrayed in a healthy way on screen. Now, of course, I'm not saying you can't have a female fight or be tough or strong or intelligent or better than a man in some way. I think that can be done well, but clearly this girl boss thing has just played itself out. Now, here's my opinion. You can take it or leave it. I think one way, a good example of the way Hollywood can improve on the problems in the past and still leave you satisfied and with a quality story is the Daniel Craig Bond films. So personally, I think that Sean Connery was an excellent James Bond, and his first 2 to 3 films were just simply amazing. However, as they went on, I do think that the franchise did become a bit, literally, quite chauvinist. And some of the scenes in which Bond is interacting with women through this, maybe the 70s, actually make me wince a bit. So you can call me old-fashioned, you can call me Southern, you can call me religious. I just think that those sort of overt objectification of women is not necessary. The current filmmakers seem to be quite aware of this, and so what they did instead of flipping the trope around and therefore objectifying the man as much as the women, they made them more human. I think this is a great solution. So Daniel Craig becomes more of a human being. He's more of a three-dimensional character. And as the franchise goes on, you learn about why he is the way that he is. He grew up an orphan. All the women in his life have either betrayed him or died. He's a very skeptical man. He's a sort of a modern man living in a postmodern world. It's a very complex thing. And then ultimately he falls in love and gives himself for a woman with whom he has a very mature love. But they don't actually undermine or destroy the character to do this. They don't try to make him feel stupid or foolish and therefore alienate their own audience to elevate some other character. Contrast that to Luke Skywalker, and they just try to destroy the trope of your expectation. They try to overturn the hero trope, and they make him, if you thought he was a hopeful optimist who would never quit and will try to redeem and help everyone, well, they just turn it on its head, thinking it's clever, patting themselves on the back for breaking your expectation. But really what they did is they betrayed your expectation, and they annoyed their audience. In Hollywood, I've said this before, but overturning the trope has become the trope. The way they can surprise me most at this point is just to tell a good story. And again, it comes off as preachy. I said this in a past video, but I really think of those 90s Christian movies that were pretty horrible. They weren't good art, but the Christians who liked these things sort of patted themselves on the back because they got the message across. So the writing was bad, the acting was bad, it was an inferior product, it was inferior art, but they got the message to you, and that's all that matters. Boy, these new Hollywood productions so often feel like that, just with a message from the ideological left and with a higher budget. It still turns people off. We still know we're being preached to when we didn't ask for it. Another thing I think is just sadly evident is that the quality of the films, ideological messaging aside and the preachiness of it aside, have I said preachiness yet? Because I think that's a thing. I think the art has simply gone down in quality. If you look at the best CGI from the era of George Lucas changing all this, late 90s to early 2000s, up into, maybe 2005, you're going to see that at the time they were pushing the boundaries of CGI. They were still limited. But boy, did some of the CGI then, when they put their best foot forward, somehow, unfathomably, look so much better than these giant blockbuster movies CGI coming out today. This, again, I think comes back to that sort of moral hypocrisy betrayal people feel, because at this point, with social media and everyone having a platform, well, we simply know things about the lifestyle of people in Hollywood, and it turns out people who work for special effects groups and writers who are not yet famous, they're not treated well. These studios will hire them, work them to death, cut them out, let them go, and the result is, very often, while there are few exceptions, Spider-Man, oftentimes the CGI now looks worse than it did 20 years ago. People notice these things, but it does sometimes come across as though our moral betters in Hollywood, and I want to be charitable to these people, they're not the enemy, but I think sometimes one would get the impression that they think if we just give you explosions, flashy lights, and bright colors, you rubes will kind of just keep paying for it. But sometimes people are smarter than we get credit for. It's almost like they feel if they just stamp an IP on something, Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Disney, etc., and they don't do the same level of effort, that you won't tell the difference. You just want more Star Wars. You just want more Indiana Jones. But we notice. So again, we're paying excessive prices to go to the theater, to get all these various streaming services for the entertainment, and we're paying more than we ever were for various reasons, yet we're still getting less of a product. And in a market system, if people are not happy with the product, eventually someone else will come and take that market share. It's pretty simple. People are definitely turning towards foreign films, anime, various other things, Japanese and South Korean entertainment, because that quality is rising while the American quality of entertainment is falling. So I have no doubt that to make something in America and make it well costs more than it would in some other countries. I can understand this. And yet at some point, these runaway budgets spent on special effects that aren't needed sometimes make the profit margin very risky for these films, for these studios. And what I would say is, Marvel changed cinema. Now, when I started watching the Marvel movies back when they started coming out, I got super excited. I grew up watching and reading some comic books, some of the animated, Saturday morning shows, as much as I was allowed to. And as I got older, I started reading more comic books. And then, so when Captain America came out, I was like, man, this is pretty cool. And then they teased you with another character they're going to bring in. You're like, man, this is so cool. It's just like when I was a kid, but now they know we're grown-ups. They're giving us these really cool cartoons on the big screen. But here's the thing. I think most of us didn't really think this was real cinema. We just thought it was fun popcorn flicks. And we were just getting these fun Saturday morning cartoons that we could talk about with our friends. The problem is Hollywood took the wrong message, and they thought that these giant blockbuster hits that are making so much money must be the future. And so now everything is a franchise. No franchise ever dies. They just keep making them well past when the story climaxes. And they seem to think that the reason for their success is just a lot of CGI and a lot of action and some cheesy humor that is actually sometimes degrading and goes too far, that makes light of very serious moments. That can have its place, but when all of cinema starts taking that shape, well, cinema has lost something very serious. We no longer have those deep, meaningful, touching moments of cinema from the 30s through the 2000s. I listened to an interview by Matt Damon some time ago, and he was talking about the movie Good Will Hunting, which I was a younger man. I really enjoyed that. I didn't like, as I read some of the books they promote in that film, Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States. It's sort of a Marxist read of history. I didn't quite care for that. But the film itself, it was great. Robin Williams gives a great performance. Matt Damon said that film probably couldn't get made today because of the way the industry has structured itself around Marvel and these big blockbuster CGI films. And I think that's a problem. I think that Hollywood has to be creative in the way that it funds these films, makes more human stories without giant CGI, blockbuster action, cheesy lines, degrading humor, and finds a way to get that product to the consumer in which they still make money. There's got to be a path forward for that, but just ceasing to make all such films is not the answer. I'm sure it's a complex problem for the studio execs, but at the end of the day, I'm pretty sure the causes of these problems and the solution is very simple. One of my favorite writers, living writers, is a man named Neil Gaiman. Now, I cannot promote everything that he's written. Some of it is disturbing in a way that I think did not need to be done, but some of it is just really good. His vocabulary is good. He has beautiful prose. He's a talented gentleman. He said something, and it was encouraging to me. He said, on the good days and the bad days, make good art.
Make good art. Leg crushed and then eaten by a mutated boa constrictor, make good art. IRS on your trail, make good art. Cat exploded, make good art. Someone on the internet thinks what you're doing is stupid or evil or it's all been done before, make good art. Probably things will work out somehow, and eventually time will take the sting away, and that doesn't even matter. Do what only you can do best. Make good art. Make it on the bad days, make it on the good days too.
If Hollywood just got back to making good art, and I think there are some directors, some producers who do attempt this, but if that was the focus, making good art, and the art didn't suffer for profits, or the art didn't suffer for ideological messaging, I think people would resonate with it so much more, and they could slowly begin to gain back the confidence that they've clearly lost. Unfortunately, if I hear of a sequel to a beloved childhood franchise, my first instinct is to groan, and so is most of my friends. That is a problem for an industry whose main thrust is to please their audience. If our instinct is skepticism about you announcing a new film and a franchise that we love, clearly you've lost the confidence. Now, I think this is going to require quite a bit of work because the world has changed a bit, and you might have to be creative, you might have to be original, you might have to, take those old methods that people in the past have done. You might have to take the old motifs or hero journey or 3-act story structure or whatever and find new and original ways to do this, new and original ways to market it, new and original ways to make profit. But at the end of the day, if you just focus on making good art, you already have the infrastructure, you have the talent, people will again begin to resonate with it. As it is now, on the current projection, if nothing changes, I think that Hollywood within my lifetime, before I'm an old man, will be eclipsed by other industries. But I think this can all be fixed. The people in Hollywood are often very talented, often intelligent, and they have the infrastructure. And if they just focus again on making good art, I think people will resonate with it, and this can be fixed. So for many of us, Hollywood, we're rooting for you.